good evening, and welcome to your favorite Tuesday night show here on blackdoctor.org, and that is House Call with Dr. Gigi. I, of course, am Elistine, the Director of Digital Programming at blackdoctor.org. And as you know, let me take care of some housekeeping first. So please, in the comments section, let us know where you're watching from. We love to see where you're watching from all over the world. And also, please, if you have any questions throughout the show, please put them in the comments section and we will try to get to them as much as possible and answer your questions, because this show is all about you. Let me say that up first. And I will say also, I'm going to be a little bit transparent here, Dr. Gigi, and say,
please.
One of the things that we do at Black Doctors, we feel like, we want to provide culturally relevant health and wellness information to our audience. And I think we do a pretty good job with that. But sometimes, it just doesn't have to come from us. And, we can be a little bit arrogant at times and think, hey, we got the top, medical site for Black Americans, and we get that information. We got the pulse, and we do all these great things. And you feel really good. And I really am really proud of the work that we do at Black Doctor, but we're not the only people that can do it. And tonight I am very, very excited about our guest, because she has done something that many people wouldn't even think about doing. They just yell at the news and say, when there's something new comes out, they just yell at the news. And there's very few people in the world that says, you know what, I'm going to go out and do something about it. If I see a problem, I'm going to be the change that I want to see in the world. And that is our guest this evening. I'm very, very excited to have her as part of our program. So before we get to her, I always have to say, hello, Auntie Gigi.
How are you, Mr. Dean? I too am very excited. And then just to kind of piggyback on what you said, the reason that I wanted to invite our special guest this evening is because she is a bright star, and there are lots of people. I think sometimes, we get so jaded because we're watching all the news, the negative things, the people who are sort of the bad folks get a lot of attention, but I don't think that we focus on the good people. And there are lots of good people doing a lot of work, maybe with no kind of attention, big and small. Actually, I'm going to digress for a second. I was talking with my folks today, and I was thinking about somebody that made an impact in my life, and that is Mr. Lewis, our mailman. And the reason I loved Mr. Lewis so much, he's now retired, he's fine, is that he not only was excellent at his job and brought pride into his job, but he actually was a therapist. I live in a building, and you could see all the little old ladies, basically sitting there looking forward to him coming and just talking to them. And he used to deliver the mail for the two sides of the building, which has, so many people. He did it just by himself. After he, retired, they couldn't get the mail straight. But he was a therapist. He didn't have the, PhD or MD or social work or whatever it is. Right. But let me tell you, he was somebody that I admired so much. And then when he retired, they had a huge party for him in the building with a couple of hundred people showed up. So heroes and people that impact our lives come in all different, ways. And it could be something that impacts us for just, a smile in the morning, that somebody says hello, or, they compliment you on, your hair looks nice. Or in this particular case, what you're wearing, Mr. Ellis, looks very nice, I have to say.
Well, we had a special guest. I had to get special.
Yes,
for her.
Indeed. Yes, indeed. So, but she really is something. I'm going to let you introduce her, because you and she went to college at the same place. So
we did.
Please.
We did. And I will say this, my mother has a lot of sayings. And one of the sayings that she would say is that people are in your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime.
Yes, indeed.
And this is one of those people that I'm very, very happy to say that she has been part of my life for a lifetime. And I'm very, very happy that she is part of my life. And so we're going to stop gushing and we're going to bring her on. This is Miss Cheryl Hargrove Howard, executive producer of Flip the Script. Good evening, Ms. Howard. Are you blushing yet? You're on mute. Take yourself off mute.
Yeah. Unmute, please, because we want to hear your beautiful voice. You can't unmute? I think, let's see.
There should be like a little mic around where your picture is. There you go.
She found it. She found it. Yay!
Good, because that took me out of that moment. I really am overwhelmed by just the support that you have both shown for Flip the Script vaccination and just this opportunity to amplify what I believe to be a baby step, but you all are really making it into a giant leap. Our mission to save lives from dying of COVID-19. Thank you so much, both of you, for having me. I'm truly honored to be here.
Yeah. So you did, when you knew Mr. Ellis, did he have more hair?
A little bit more. But he was always very clean cut, clean,
yes,
shaven, you know, very preppy, if I can tell.
Right. We'll talk after the show about that.
Oh, too many stories. You don't want to be bored. My life was very boring in college.
Okay.
That's okay. That's okay. Boring is underrated, especially when you're younger. Let me tell you. Right. The older that I get, I appreciate boring. It means no drama, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So actually,
at least that's what I tell myself now.
Yeah,
no drama.
It was actually you, Mr. Ellis, that introduced Miss Cheryl and I, and I just was really taken by her story of identifying sort of a need and sort of going forward. So I wonder if we could start and hear sort of about how you got in this space and what motivated you.
Absolutely. So I too was one of the people afraid to get vaccinated. I was not in the space of not getting it. I was just like, it's a little early. The same things that I know you've both heard. Fortunately, I was blessed to have a friend that is a physician and also producer of the Roundtables, Dr. Linda Green. And Dr. Green, when she got her first dose, I said, "How do you feel today? Everything okay? What are you experiencing? How do you feel tonight?" And I would check in every day. And thankfully she was, to that. But I thought, what if we all had the opportunity to phone a friend and ask how they felt? A friend that actually understands the science and can tell you that these side effects are okay. Because then you were afraid if you got a lump right under your arm that something really bad has gone wrong. But I asked them to talk me off of the ledge or even get me to the ledge to take the shot. And I thought, if I can get the jab or whatever we're calling it today, what about just sharing my story? And also understanding, Ellis and Dr. Gigi, that there is a community out there that cannot get vaccinated or perhaps will not get vaccinated. And whatever that hopefully small percentage is, what information can be shared with those individuals so that they can make more informed decisions that help save the lives of not only their lives, but that of their loved ones and the greater community. Because I think today we're at 675,071 lives lost, according to the CDC. Right here. That's heartbreaking. So what baby step could I take? And this was the one. Let's talk to doctors.
And speaking of babies, it is the Black and brown boys that are leading the death rates among children. Yeah. And I just want to get that out there because although we're lucky that in general the COVID does not claim a lot of kids' lives, the percentage is relatively low because Delta is more infectious. The numbers of children being impacted is higher. And for some reasons that we don't quite understand yet, it's the Black and Latino boys who lead to the death rates.
When you shared that with me, I sent that text to everyone I know and love that has babies and asking forward. It's very humbling and devastating. It's a very scary time for all of us. And I'm really grateful to you and Ellis and blackdoctor.org for having these platforms for all of us to learn and share and grow together so that we can stop the dying.
Yeah, I think, Cheryl, and you called it Flip the Script. So why that terminology in terms of your program, and kind of tell people how your program just grew into what it is today?
Absolutely. So I thought flip the script because we're changing the approach. I think both of you know me well enough to know that I like to approach things from a loving space as opposed to an angry or, a dramatic space. And I thought if you can, as my godfather would say, meet people where they are, accepting, acknowledging that their positions are valid. So the change of the approach is what I call the REV method. We engage one another with respect, empathy, and validation, understanding that there are things that we have in common. There are things that we can share, such as some of the physicians have shared inequities in care, just seeing it in their hospitals or going through med school. And these things bring us together as opposed to divide us. So let's flip the script, and I'll credit my husband for the second half of that title, which is vaccination. He said, why couldn't it just be vaccination? Isn't this what we're trying to do? And well, yes, so we've changed the spelling, but it's flipped the script, vaccination, so that we all, like I said, change our approach and really engage one another with ultimately love. And Dr. Gigi, when I said, Ellis, please, I need to know her, you recommended her, but you ended one of our panels with final thoughts, and your final thought was, I love you. And I got a lump in my throat and tears in my eyes because that is exactly it. This is about loving your community. This is about loving beyond your friends and your family, but the greater good of all. And that was how this was born, and that's what keeps us going.
So how did you get the idea in the first place? I mean, what did you see that made you feel like I want to be part of the solution? What was it? Was it one event? Was it a series of things?
So I was watching the news like everyone else, and I was seeing those numbers rise. I would see the stories, especially in the assisted living facilities, where bags were being carried out and stacked and nowhere to place people. These weren't bags, these were people. And at some point,
Right.
they had a life and a story and a family. And you saw that children were being robbed of their parents. And it's just, I was despondent. And I would say to, my mother and my husband, I need to do something. I don't know what that is. But what Ellis may know, but you don't know, Dr. Gigi, is that I own a staffing and promotions agency. And I produce events, but usually for companies. And during COVID, ways to practice self-care, I would actually throw these virtual jazz brunches or events called Toasted, where we would just find ways to celebrate one another in what seemed to be despair. And so if I have Dr. Linda Green, who can call upon her friends, and then ultimately Ellis Dean, who would call upon his friends, and we can have these conversations where your doctor is more tangible, if you will, in a virtual setting, and you
Mm-hmm.
can ask questions where you will not be judged for, what about that chip in my shoulder? When you can
Right.
ask these questions and be responded to with respect, again, empathy and validation, then let's do it and see what happens.
So wait a second, I've got a question. So
Sure.
in other words, you can do like a virtual party? Is that what you're saying? I need to talk to you after this.
You know how to reach me.
Well, it's amazing. So yes, Cheryl is a bit of an empath, and for those that don't understand what that is, it's somebody that feels other people, right? And so each one of those deaths, even though it may not be somebody that she doesn't know, she felt it, right? And she felt compelled to want to stop just that general death, and it's somebody that's random, and we tend to be numbed to it by media and movies and all of this bombarding into our psyche and our subconscious, that we just don't really, we disassociate the real pain that comes from every person that has passed from this horrific disease, because they all had families and they had nurses that were treating them, and we're hearing about nurses suffering from PTSD as a result of being around so much death and just leaving the profession altogether. We're talking about doctors becoming frustrated. We did a show a couple of weeks ago
Mm-hmm.
about the frustration that doctors are having from people, from treating so many people that are against being vaccinated, but they're coming in and they can barely breathe. And so just the mental strain that they're going through, and we seem to be disconnected from that when we're fighting about wearing masks and masking children and all of these petty arguments that we're having on the political space, and not realizing there's a very personal side to these stories, that of that 675,000 plus people that have passed as a result, reportedly have passed as a result of COVID. Those are very real people, and they're very real numbers, and we have to take that very seriously. But the good news is 182 million people to date are now fully vaccinated, and those numbers are going up. The bad news is that the Delta variant is the predominant variant in the country right now, and it's very fierce. And so, just the latest news: Pfizer is applying to have their vaccine for emergency use authorization for children aged 5 to 11. That is some good news. So now we can have school-age children be vaccinated if they get that emergency use authorization. And down the road, we're looking at Johnson has released, the Janssen vaccine has released that if you get the booster shot from them, that it improves their efficacy up to 92%. And so now we're talking about, but the FDA is still kind of on the fence on the booster shot situation. They are recommending it for our elderly population, and they are, and for people that are frontline workers, like hospital doctors and nurses and things like that. But they're asking for the general population to have some caution and hold some restraint, because we need to get the unvaccinated vaccinated before we start thinking about booster shots. Because the more unvaccinated people we can get vaccinated, the less we will need a booster shot.
That's right. That's right.
And so let's focus on that instead of us that are vaccinated going running out and getting a booster shot and lowering that supply. We need to be trying to get the people that are unvaccinated the information they need to make an informed decision. And that's where Cheryl and her program comes into play, because they pretty much, we have done probably about 50 to 60 of these programs of Black Doctor, and we're going to continue to do them.
Yeah. One thing that I want to sort of ask Miss Cheryl, because I'm very interested in the idea of serving others. I think that one thing during a pandemic that has really suffered is our own mental health. And when you look at people who have the resilience, whether it's in life or, in general, if you look at people who've lived long lives and have had, full lives, or if you're talking about going through a difficult time, research shows that when you focus outside of yourself, that actually helps your own mental health. And sometimes I feel in our society, everything is me, social media, selfies, all that kind of stuff, that we have forgotten that. So that's why I'm so curious to kind of learn what your personal story was. How did that translate from seeing all the people that were in the body bags and knowing that there were stories behind that into the action that you've taken? Because to me, COVID is an issue, right? And someday, hopefully soon, that will be an issue that will be under control. Health equity is going to be a long-standing issue, but there are other issues of social justice, et cetera. So for people who are listening, and for me personally, I love to hear, because you inspire me, right? So what was your process, and then how did you go from an idea to actually getting something tangible?
So some may say that I'm willing to just jump in the water and then figure out how to swim while I'm in it. But I knew that I wanted to do something, whether it be a documentary or a docu-series, where we actually connect with people, just as you said. And you were a part of the panel where we actually shared a clip of the story of Tina, where we lost a loved one in our circle of family and dear friends. And I asked her brother if he would be willing to share her story, which he was. And I knew that telling stories would help people feel more connected. I felt something from seeing those bags of, as I said earlier, these were people, these were lives, people with families. But I know that sometimes it's harder to see the image. It's harder to digest the impact of that image because there's so much information, as you said, Ellis, earlier, coming at you. So if I could connect real faces to these rising number of cases, I think people will feel a sense of urgency to make a decision regarding how they're going to keep themselves, their loved ones, and again, the greater community safe from COVID-19. This is a very real virus. And at first, I didn't know anyone personally, but then it became, I know friends who've lost siblings or parents or children, sadly. And one of the panelists, every week I would meet on a panel, it would go from the youngest person I've seen this week pass in my hospital was 28 years old. I think you were on that panel, Ellis. When
I
he
was.
served on our panel, that was Dr. O'Neill Pike from Jackson in Miami, and he said the youngest person this week was 15 years old. And my heart just drops. But then what I do, probably to heal, I think others that have known I've had grief in my life would say, you get busy, right? I find things to do that helps me. You said it already. Helping others helps me feel good. And I see this as a baby step, but I had to do something. And if it takes off or impacts one life, I feel like it's worth it. And one of the interviews that I've done, Dr. Linda Green shared that she couldn't wait for her 5-year-old to be able to get vaccinated. And I got a text that evening from someone that heard the interview that said, I just want you to know that I get my first dose tomorrow. I've been afraid, but when a doctor says they're ready to get their 5-year-old vaccinated, it's time for me to take action as well. So we're making a difference. This does matter. And we're impacting lives, and people walk away feeling respected. Even if on that call they're not going to get the vaccine, or if on that call they're at least hesitant to get the vaccine. We're impacting lives. And that means so much to me because, well, we talked about the numbers already.
You're bringing up an interesting point, because that's one of the questions that we had in the comment section from Corinne. So, Corin, I hope I'm mispronouncing your name, but that's just blame the Southerner in me for that one. But she's asking, how do we get all the parents to get vaccinated so they can protect the children that can't be unvaccinated? Because as we see, there are schools that are closing and quarantining left and right. We've already heard, the horror stories of teachers that have perished, prior to the school, and so it is becoming a serious problem. And so what we've seen from the medical community is saying, if we could vaccinate the people around the children, then that would help them become protected, because the Delta variant is infecting younger children. And so, but how do we convince those parents that are around those younger children that are younger than age 12? How do we convince them to get vaccinated?
So I'll start, but I would love the doctor to finish out with the answer. One of the panelists, Dr. Yola, I believe it was, that shared, and please correct me, Dr. Gigi, if I'm incorrect, she shared, you're absolutely right. It's not the children giving each other COVID. It's the parents, it's the teachers, it's the staff. And I think, again, exposing people to as much truth, facts, and real data as possible. You've mentioned time and again, Ellis, that social media is where people, if you click on an algorithm, an algorithm kicks in when you click on certain information, and then more of that just continues coming in your direction. And then you go down a rabbit hole. So it's about feeding that with truth and facts. Roundtables like mine, certainly these large efforts like blackdoctor.org, and of course, referencing sites like CDC, WHO, and NIH. Those are places that you can get truth, science-driven, science-based facts. And in addition, talk to the people you love and trust that have been vaccinated, that have survived COVID and have gotten vaccinated. Talk to your doctor. And I relieve the mic.
So no, that's precisely correct. And let me tell you, when I'm trying to convince, whether it be parents, grandparents, uncles, aunties, to quit smoking, I always bring children into the conversation, because I remind them that it is for them that they're doing this because of the potential impact on them. So this is an approach, to your point, Ms. Cheryl, that respect of a person's dignity and autonomy is so important. And that is triply, quadruply, a million times more important when we're talking about people from the African diaspora, because
Mhm.
that has been stripped. And the last several years, with all the things that have happened, right, from the serial and ongoing murders of Black people, to just the economic hardships, to COVID, to all of it. um, when people enter, especially the healthcare space, we as physicians traumatize them. And that can start actually from the moment that they get to the office. It could be the staff that are checking people in. It can be just the look or the tone that people get spoken to. And certainly, there was somebody that made this, shared this the other day, and actually research has backed it up. If you are overweight, especially as a Black woman, gosh, you get lectured to about your weight a gazillion times by a gazillion people when you may be coming in for, like, I don't know, a broken arm. I mean, everything gets related to your weight. So that's why I think what you're doing is so powerful about bringing it back to the individual human being, and the Rev approach that you talked about, of sort of um, respecting, educating, and vaccinating, but in a pulling back from just from the COVID narrative. One of the problems that we have in our society that has actually made COVID more difficult to deal with is that people feel alienated. They don't feel a part of the society. They don't feel that what happens to them matters. And so when that happens, then you have people just doing stuff. Well, I'm just going to do what I want to do, and forget that. So what you're talking about is actually so profound and really speaks about the development of community. And I'll just digress for a quick second. Has anybody seen the documentary Summer of Soul? So Summer of
Yes.
Soul, it's on Hulu, and it's about the Black Woodstock. It was the same summer of, I guess, 1969. It was in Harlem. It was a series of musical performances, and when you see the people coming as families and watching, all the community coming together, I felt like, wow, man, that I felt so sad, because that's one of the things that we have lost, right? So what you're talking about, I wish you'd speak more about it. Really, is why that is just so important for the work that you're doing.
It is very important. I'd like to go off topic just a little bit here to say that I grew up in a community called Lauderdale Lakes in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And everyone in that neighborhood was my auntie and my uncle. And they were all responsible for you. So, on top of having the love and support of my parents, Larry and Lacey Hargrove, thank you for supporting me, I also had a lot of aunties and uncles that loved on me up close and from afar. So, I still have the support of that community. Those aren't blood relatives, but those are people who have an interest in your well being. And I got a lot of that. I think that's rubbed off on me that, my husband will say, why are we in this grocery store talking to this stranger? I don't know. I just felt like they needed, I needed to just have this conversation. It is important to connect with individuals. It is important to also open one's perspective to know that your story, the eyes through which we view life, is not the only one. And,
Mhm.
and to bring that back, to flip the script, we address, and you've seen this, both of you in the room, we address that there is a reason why there's skepticism and a lack of trust when it comes to medicine. There's, a litany of inequities that have
Right.
happened, especially to our people. And the furthest one back that I've seen, and please dispute me if it goes even further back, but we're talking the father of gynecology and doing, what was it, 30, at least 30 vesicovaginal fistulas. So it's just you can explain what that is, but a surgical repair for women that have had children. 30 on his slave alone, Anarcha Westcott. And that was without anesthesia. So we didn't have the power over our bodies. We didn't have the ability to say yes or no, or that would be our life. And in honor of the ancestors that took that journey across the transatlantic, that suffered abuse, rape, theft, murder to bring us here today, I have to honor them in the best way possible. And I believe that one of those ways is through Flip the Script. I believe one of those ways is, instead of dividing us, where there's so many ways we can find to be divided, let's find ways that we can connect and unite and find common ground and be responsible. And if that's for many of us get the vaccine, let it be that. And if it's for those of us that will not, let it be such an informed decision that you make wise choices about your beings and doings, so that you do not catch COVID, spread COVID, or lose your life, or God forbid, someone that you love to COVID-19.
You know, every time you speak, I want to cry. And here you talked about the woman, right? And you know, Black bodies and how they, you know, are seen as dispensable. Actually, the other day I was reading an article about how even plastic surgery is appropriating Black bodies with the type of lip enhancement that's done, or the Brazilian butts. I mean, all of that is the commodification. And if you want to talk about a horrible story, I don't know if people know about Hottentot, who was a South African woman who had a big derriere, and actually they would parade her around Europe. And they actually removed that part of her body after she died and had it on display. And after Nelson Mandela, you know, was elected president, and the apartheid system was dismantled, he brought her body back, you know, or that part of her body back, so that it can be buried and given the respect. So what you're saying is just so important. And I wanted to also speak a little bit about the disinformation that's out there, because there is a concerted campaign that is focused on Black and brown people. There is a video that's making the rounds. It's very well produced. It's animated. It's very slick, and it has a number of sort of conspiracy theories that are out there, but they have Black and brown characters. And so I was having this discussion with my nephew, who, you know, I mean, there are conspiracies, they're real. And he's like, Auntie, who's gonna, you know, they just want to control all, especially Black and brown people. And I'm like, okay, so tell me, who benefits from a video like this? Who is dying by not getting the vaccination? Who is dying from COVID? 1/3 of people dying from COVID are Black and brown. So there's a lot that's there. And you're right. We can't just dig our heels and say, do this, listen to me, I know better. It is about a conversation.
It is. I said before that if someone yells at me, shouts at me, or tells me how I should think or believe, instead of hearing my perspective, I immediately shut down and do not listen.
I can attest to that.
Others are right.
Yeah, and I see I've been corrected. Thank you. Maybe
Ancho, I'll put it back on the screen there.
Please, thank you.
Yes.
Sarjay Bartman, I'm sorry. Yes. Now, why am I thinking about Hottentot? That's another story. There are so many stories that one can confuse the name, but thank you so much for that correction.
And she was part of a circus act.
Yeah.
I mean, just to be treated as less than human, you know, those days should be over.
So you mentioned, you know, Cheryl, when you were talking, and Dr. Gigi, the words that keeps coming out is stories, right? And so it's the stories that connect us in terms of our shared history. We have a rich oral tradition as part of our culture. But also it's the stories that about the real experiences of people with COVID and that have felt COVID in their lives, impact on their lives, is what could be more compelling than doctors wagging that finger of condemnation and instruction. You got to go get vaccinated. But tell the story. Hear the stories of people. And so, Cheryl, I know you have a wonderful story that you have archived as part of your Flip the Script. that it's a heart-wrenching story, but it's a real story that talks about a person's the impact that COVID has had on their life. And so I don't know if you could pull that up. We've been having some streaming issues here. I apologize for that. That's on me. But if you can pull that up,
Yes.
I think we want to share that story so people can get that real feel of what we're talking about when we're talking about the impact that COVID has had on our community.
Absolutely. Let's try to pull this up and see if we can make this happen. Let me know if you can see my screen. And then we have those challenges.
First and foremost, her name is Katina Patrice Jones. She's my older sister. She was 49 years old when she was impacted by COVID-19. She was a elementary school teacher for 24 years. So she just had a passion for students, a passion for education, and just a passion for people and putting smiles on faces. Hands down, the funniest person I know. She could light up a room like no other. And there's plenty of stories to prove that. But, deep down inside, she had an amazing spirit. Like I can't say it enough. She loved her family. Her and my mom were best friends. Her and my dad, I would say they were best friends, A and B. So, there's millions of memories, that comedic spirit that she had. There were times where we would have great laughs and, words didn't even need to come out. It was just facial expressions and, reading minds, so to speak. We were 4 years apart, but you would have thought we were twins the way we could read each other's minds. But definitely that comedic spirit and that love that she had for family will definitely be cherished, missed. But I got a strong belief that she's still here. Maybe not physically, but that spirit is still alive and moving in everyone she touched. So I know she's here. Around July 1st, July 2nd, she was diagnosed, went in, tested positive. They didn't take her in at that moment, like a lot of patients, for whatever reasons. Maybe she didn't have the symptoms that they wanted to take her in for. But on July 6th, that's when there was a shift and she was having some very shortness of breathing. I live in Wesley Chapel, Florida, and she's actually in Fort Lauderdale area. So I made the phone call when I heard her breathing. I made the phone call to the ambulance to pick her up, and that was on the night of July 6th. She stayed in the hospital until she passed, which is August 10th. So she was in there about a month and 4 days. So she went in on July 4th and she passed away on August 10th at 1:46. So you couldn't really have long conversations and you didn't want to, right? So I was able to communicate with her. Our last communication was on the 10th of July. And that's when they put her on the ventilator after that day. So there was no longer any communication as far as that was concerned. While I was actually cleaning up her place after she had passed, one of the things I found in her home was an actual appointment set up for July. Actually, it was set up for June 15th. I take that back. It was set up for June 15th to get her first shot. So, which was 5 days after her birthday. Her birthday was on June 10th. So, Tina wasn't necessarily against vaccinations. I think like a lot of people, she was on the fence about the severity of going to get it right now. So, in all honesty, I really believe that eventually she would have, went and got the shot. But I think she just, for whatever reason, did not make it an extreme priority at that time to get the shot. So I think, like everyone else, people have questions, which is pretty logical about anything that you put in your body. Um, but there was nothing that she gave us any inkling into, she was against the vaccine. Even though she was a comedic spirit, she probably would say, "Take my picture down. Why do you have my picture up all over the place?" That's probably the first thing that she would say, right? Um, but in all honesty, I think she would be proud of how her legacy and how her situation could impact someone that's still alive, that's still here to make a decision. Um, I think if anything comes out of her passing, what should come out of it is it's important to take every day and make your health a priority in every day, at every moment. I think that she would be extremely happy with the fact that through her death, someone is going to be affected to the point where they make a decision. Because already we've had people that have come to us and said, because of what happened with Tina, your sister, I'm going to get the shot, or I have gone to get the shot. So if her passing contributed to someone's life being saved, then her death isn't in vain. The message that I would like to send out is that COVID is real. COVID doesn't care how much money you have. COVID doesn't care what color you are. COVID doesn't care where you live. And the message is that this does not need to happen to a lot of families that it's happening to. And my family and I would like to be an example so that other individuals don't have to live this same nightmare, where their Katina Jones from their family is no longer here, where they have to come and do an interview, where they have to start a scholarship fund for their individual's legacy. I would much rather my sister hear it. But I understand that wasn't the plan. So the only thing that I can do is make sure that her name is not forgotten as long as I'm breathing on this earth. I started a scholarship at Dillard High School in Fort Lauderdale. And through their alumni association, we established the Katina Patrice Scholarship. Katina Patrice Jones Scholarship Fund through Dillard High School. So definitely, we're going to provide you guys with some information for you to donate if you want to. I'm quite sure they'll leave a link somewhere in the bio for you guys to donate to that. But what we want to do is we want to offer students that are going to attend the HBCU, Historically Black College University. We want to offer them a scholarship if they're taking up their major is going to be in education. And we are looking for our first couple years, we want to do young ladies that are taking up an education major, and we want to help them out with a scholarship. So we're hoping to continue in her legacy and maybe have the next young lady taking up that profession and helping out students that really need to see these positive role models and get an understanding of why education is so important to them.
All right, put out one close one too many screens there. So that's a heart-wrenching story, but that makes it real, right? And so, I think sometimes we talk about COVID, it doesn't seem real. Like, we understand it's an airborne virus. We understand that it likes to multiply. I've got videos. We got videos on Black Doctors YouTube talking about the origin of the coronavirus. All from way back, and then how when mRNA technology. So I got all that somewhere in this bald head, but that doesn't make it real. It's that story. It's those stories of family members that are left here to grieve and left here to put the pieces back together, of not being able to talk to his sister for a month because she was in the hospital and on a ventilator, not being able to go in and see her because of COVID protocols, and still having to bury her. And so those are the things that we're here, and that's why Dr. Gigi and I are here every other Tuesday. That's why I'm here 3 or 4 times a week. And we're not always talking about COVID. So I know some people say we're always talking about COVID. We've talked about every other medical condition that you could think of. I promise you I'm going to go to PA school when I decide to leave Black Doctor. But I all jokes aside, I think that those are the stories that make it real, and that's why we're happy to have you here, Cheryl, because you're capturing those stories, and you're helping share those stories with the population to get them to really understand the impact that COVID is having on our people.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the Jones family and Corey Jones for just being willing to share and be vulnerable and share the story of his sister and talk about the COVID-19 experience and how it impacted their family and one of the ways in which they're picking up the pieces. I'd also like to thank our co-producer, Marlon Olivier, who helped produce this piece, as well as our director, Lisa Arundel. Both have worked in the industry for years, and just that they saw what I'm trying to do, and they said, whatever I can do to help and make this happen, let's roll up our sleeves and get to work. And the extension to all of you, all of the panelists that have come to the room that really to support what we're trying to do, because all of you panelists really do care about people. No one has been resistant. I haven't had one physician that we've approached, that Linda's approached, say no. In fact, they're like, well, when's the next one? Can we do this every week? No, I don't think I can, but I'm really grateful to see that the love for community, especially the communities of color that suffer the most, are getting support from the doctors that serve them. This is a testimony that love is very real and it is very active, and that energy is floating around because of all of the yeses that we've gotten since Flip the Script vaccination began. So I think,
and I just want to say it's not just the doctors. It's the incredible angels on earth called nurses.
Yes.
And
yes.
all the people that work in the health systems, whether it's the procurement people, the people that are in the medical assistants, because people tend to forget about them, the people that maintain the buildings, sort of all of that. But I want to kind of, COVID has been hyper focused on, but really COVID, you can interchange it with any other illness, right? You can say diabetes, you can say stroke, you can say sickle cell, you can say lupus. And that's the point. And so when people get saturated with COVID, I just like to bring them back and say that this is just the latest example, right?
Right.
And what's different is that we all, our collective attention as a society has been focused because we're all going through it together. That doesn't diminish the loss that somebody has if it's from a heart attack or, any other illness or cancer or whatever. But I do believe very strongly that the model that, whether it's blackdoctor.org or Flip the Script or the Rodham Institute or the Black Coalition Against COVID or is, or I should say, and, that model is really going back to something that was successful. And that is, when we think about the civil rights movement, it was not just one individual. It
Right.
was many sectors that were coming together. It was broad coalitions. It was people working in their community. But all of us or all people at that time, I was, a child, having a sense of working for something that's a common good. And if there's anything that we should, learn from the civil rights movement, and that is, it will not be co-opted. It will not be dismantled. That this time around, we have to institutionalize these changes and really work on these models so that we won't keep having, this discussion about health inequity or the next pandemic or whatever that happens. So that's why I was just really focused, Ms. Cheryl, on sort of the mechanics or sort of the logistics of what you're doing. And I just love media, especially stories and documentaries or whatever, because that's so much more powerful than just a lecture. And as Mr. Ellis
Right.
so eloquently said, there's a lot of scientific facts, and yes, that's important, but why we're all here is because of Ms. Tina, or in my case, a couple of names that I can't say, but the story that I think about, which happened right at the beginning of the pandemic, was a police officer, and his had been taking care of him for many decades, and his brother had died of diabetes, and the brother had amputations, and so my patient was very reluctant to go on treatment for his diabetes, because for him, he associated going on insulin with dying, because his brother went on insulin very shortly thereafter because his diabetes was so poorly controlled. It was a little bit too late, and he ended up having the amputation and dying. So because of the diabetes that was not well controlled, he ended up coming down with COVID. And this was at the very, very beginning. This was, I want to say, it was actually when I was taking care of patients with COVID. And, for him to walk into the hospital and then barely be able to say goodbye to his fiance and his daughter, and it was because I had a wonderful colleague who brought his phone and just FaceTimed in the room with him so that he could say goodbye to his family. Or most recently, one of the patients who has a 10-year-old daughter, and, again, walked in and, not,
You know,
he's a 10-year-old.
there's one thing I want to address with Carrie, and she's one of our commenters here. She's asking about the protocols, and she's talking about high dose vitamin C, zinc, hydrochloroquine, IV hydrochloroquine is the best treatment, no ventilators. So here's what we'll say, and what I know so far. Dr. Gigi, you can kind of back me up from the medical side.
Sure.
Is do whatever you need to do to improve your immune system. There is nothing wrong with that. So if you want to take 80%, the research shows that 80% of the people, especially Black and brown people that have died, had low levels of vitamin D. Go. You should have a higher vitamin D. I was vitamin D deficient before COVID, right? My doctor, and just as a people, we tend to have low levels of vitamin D. Do whatever you need to do to boost your immune system. However, those immune boosting activities has not shown to have the same level of protection as getting vaccinated. And so what we're suggesting is this, and what many in the medical community is suggesting is this: do those things, because that's going to improve your overall health and wellness, and still get vaccinated, because that's going to teach your body how to fight the virus. And that's what's really the biggest issue, because having a sound immune system could help you fight the virus, but your body still has to recognize the virus as it's multiplying in your body to go and fight it. And then it's got to develop the antibodies to do that. While your body is doing that, that virus is still multiplying. What the vaccine does is it teaches your body to recognize the virus once it enters your system. So even though you can have those breakthrough cases, and I'm sure we've seen all on the news, there's breakthrough cases when somebody is vaccinated, but they test positive for COVID. When your body does have that breakthrough case, those cases are less severe and tend to not be hospitalized, because your body recognizes, oh, there's coronavirus in my system, and so therefore it goes in and attacks the coronavirus, and so your cases are mild, and so that's why those people are still being protected from severe illness and death, which is the intention of the vaccine, not to prevent you from catching it, it's to prevent severe illness and death. And to this point, the vaccines are doing a really good job of doing that. And so I would say do both. If I was,
I would thank you. I think that that's right. But let's again step back from COVID. Because well, we can talk about COVID. It is not just taking care of your, if you're a healthy person, sure, vitamin C and all that. I take that. I take my vitamin D replacement because I was low. I take a vitamin B12 because I was low on that. I do all that. Sleeping is key. Sleep. If you do not sleep, that has a very negative impact on your immune system.
yes.
Don't forget to all the other things that we talked about, washing hands.
Yes.
If you're not going to get vaccinated, be religious about the mask and the physical distancing. And here's something that, and I'm of Egyptian heritage, we do this a lot. And actually, before COVID, I would tell people, first of all, those brushes where you can brush under the nails, all that dirt.
Yes.
People, we need to do that, or keep the nails short if you can, or if you'd like. But don't forget that if you have diabetes, getting it under control reduces your risk of dying from COVID. If you got high blood pressure, getting that under control. And let's not forget the other things that might go on. Let's not forget about colon cancer screening and mammograms and taking care of sort of other vaccines. People who have lupus or sarcoid or sickle cell. So it's about, and of course, the mental health piece. I'm going to give you an example. Falling in love boosts your immune system. Breaking up depresses it. And you know what you were sharing, Miss Cheryl, about chit-chatting with people in the grocery store?
Yeah.
That also helps your overall health. So actually connecting with other people. So for people that decide and elect, for whatever reasons, not to get the vaccine, I hope you'll reconsider. But if you don't, please put in all these other practices into place. The hydroxychloroquine, they've done repeated studies. It does not have an impact. The ivermectin, which interestingly, this is a complete aside, but did you know that 50% of the cocaine that's sold is mixed with a deworming agent? Because it doubles the amount and it has the same kind of consistency. So just think about that for a second in terms of deworming agents. Deworming agents are used in feeding cattle to prevent them from getting infections so that we can eat them. So these issues that have been brought up by people who maybe are naysayers or whatever, it's important to look at what is being said and not just reject it outright. But I just want to remind people who are reluctant to, get a vaccine because they say, oh, well, I don't know what's in it and so forth. Do we know what's in that hamburger that we're eating? Do we know the amount of chemicals and the antibiotics that are in there, right? Not to mention potentially infections from the cattle. I love French fries, and we've talked about this before, Mr. Ellis. Barbecue potato chips, salt and vinegar, sour cream. But
Speaking my language
but
right now, Dr. Gigi. Speaking my language right now.
right. But I've had cancer twice. I'm sure that those potato chips had a role. I'm sure it did.
Yeah.
So, I want to keep this conversation going, but I just am so happy that you were able to join us today, Miss Cheryl.
I am truly
Yeah.
happy that you had me here today. I'm so honored. Thank you for allowing
No,
me.
it's been wonderful, and I think to further address what you're talking about, Dr. Gigi, is I've been hosting a series called Operation Life here on Black Doctor, and what we are doing with Operation Life is we are tackling those illnesses and ailments that disproportionately affect Black and Brown people. So if you go to our YouTube channel and you just type in Operation Life, you'll see about 6 videos on there. We talk about diabetes and hypertension and asthma and COPD and all of these conditions that affect. I've got a heart attack one coming up on Tuesday next week. So we are addressing all of those issues because all of those issues are about inflammation in the body. And if we have inflammation in the body, that is going to exacerbate if we get COVID. And so what we do, it's a two-pronged approach. We do have to do all of those protective measures that we talked about: masks, washing your hands, watching your distance, get vaccinated if you're comfortable getting vaccinated. But we also have to do that other piece of making sure that we are addressing all of these other conditions that disproportionately affect Black and Brown people and can exacerbate if you do come in contact with COVID. And so it really is a total health and wellness approach that we're taking, and that we hope that you stay on this journey with us as we continue to move forward. So I'll be back on Tuesday talking about what happens after you had a heart attack, because we know heart disease disproportionately affects Black and Brown people. Ultimately, the thing is exercise, get your sleep, and then we've got videos about sleep on there too as well. Get your sleep and eat right, and a lot of things that we deal with on a daily basis can be really eradicated if we just make sure we handle those things in our lives. And so, Cheryl, I just want to say again, thank you so much for just being who you are and engaging the world in a way that is so refreshing today. And I mean that sincerely, is that, there's so much divisiveness going on in the news. There's so much, just people are just angry all the time and not dealing with each other in love and respect. And so to have you really eschew all of that foolishness that's going on and still try to engage people in a loving way is remarkable and impressive, and it really gives me a great paradigm shift, because as you know, I can be both cynical and sarcastic, and that's not the best
No, say it isn't so.
to engage in the world. So George, I appreciate you being honest about that. George says I will do everything except take the vaccine that he'll never do. So I appreciate that honesty, George, and we appreciate that you're going to do all the other things to stay safe, because ultimately it's about you staying safe and keeping the people that are around you safe as well. So, okay.
And one thing that we didn't really talk about that also impacts your health is whether it's meditation or prayer or your spiritual practice, right? It's that's also been shown to impact your immune system, to impact your overall health. And remember to try to advocate for the people that you love, because not everybody has the access to the information. And we are best in impacting each other, right? So please try to advocate for those who don't necessarily have the voice. And yeah, this is all about, well, I can't do this, love.
I'm not going to try to do it. These hands have been too much.
Okay, you macho self there. Okay, it'll just be the girls that are doing this.
Just know I feel the love. That's why I got the red handkerchief here. It's love, representing love. So again, thank you all for joining us. Thank you all for your questions. If I will go through and make sure if there was something that needed to be addressed, I'll try to address it for you. But again, Cheryl, keep doing what you're doing. If you need either one of us, we're coming. And we're going to sit on panels if my son doesn't have another football game. But outside of that,
one thing I would like to ask you to do is just allow me to say where you can find us.
yes, please.
Which is flipthescript.online. So you can register for our next roundtable, which is Wednesday, October 27th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. But also, you saw that we want to tell your story. If you have a story that you would like to share, there is a space on our site for you to sign up and share your story with us. Someone from our production team will get in touch with you. That's flipthescript.online. Thank you, Ellis.
We'll put that on screen here. Here we go.
This technology, you're so fancy.
And this show will be rebroadcast tomorrow at noon. Is that right?
Yes, it will be rebroadcast.
Oh, there we go.
Thank you.
So my fingers, I had to type it up real quick, but we got it.
Yeah.
So Flip the Script online, and I'll put it in the comment section because in the comments you can go ahead and click on it, and it'll take you directly to her site, which is Flip the Script, and you can tell your story there. And again, they will be in contact with you. And then if you want to register for the next Flip the Script, you can go and do that on the site as well. Hopefully, I think I'll be able to make that one if I get invited.
You're both invited. If I can put you on the spot where you say yes in front of others, will you please be on the next panel?
Yeah. October 27th, right?
Yes, I will be on the next panel for you. So, Flip the Script online again. Thank you so much, Cheryl, for joining us, and Dr. Gigi. And we've already, we've got another guest coming up in 2 weeks. So thank you all for joining us. This is House Call, what Auntie Gigi, as I like to call her. Laura, I'm going to address you after. I'm going to respond to your question after we get offline, because we're going to get off air here and let Cheryl go and get back to her family and get back to doing the work that she's been doing and that's been laid on her heart. So thank you all for joining us, and we will see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.